I want to talk a little bit about why I chose Discord as the platform for my new chat server. There's going to be a little bit of tea in here, so be prepared. But as I was looking at the platforms for my new community space, the Body Liberation Blanket Fort, this is both a new effort and an echo of an older effort. I did used to run a free Facebook group called the Body Love Blanket Fort, so it was very similar. It was a little more of a pre 101. It was a little more body positivity based than fat liberation based, and the Body Liberation Blanket Fort is a little more advanced in that we're not going to be doing a ton of extremely basic diets don't work kind of education there. It's more of a support and advanced learning space. Although you can't just come and hang out. But this previous Facebook group that I had, I'm going to be really honest here. As a business owners run Facebook groups to get business. That's why people do it. And if it is also a community space or also a support space or also a space that you feel good about being in, that's great. But it's as far as, again, purely a business standpoint goes, it's kind of a side benefit. Because ultimately people run Facebook groups to get business. It's a marketing angle. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just need to understand that that's how that works. So, what ended up happening with this Facebook group is that it ended up being a huge amount of emotional labor for me because I was doing a lot of very basic education and holding a lot of emotional space for people. And I wasn't generating any business from it. I wasn't getting paid in any way, directly or indirectly, for doing this. And it just became this drain on my emotional resources. Because as much as I love people, I'm fascinated by people. I love supporting, I love cheerleading for people, but I'm not a therapist. I am not trained to hold space for people in a way that is emotionally sustainable for me. And as an autistic person, emotions are a lot. I feel them very strongly, my own and others, and I have to be very careful about my resources. And at the time that I was running this Facebook group, I was not being careful about my resources. I was not doing that in a way that was sustainable for me. And when I shut down that group, it was my apologies if you can hear the motorcycle revving right outside my door, but it was people really missed that group because it was warm and supportive and loving. But honestly, the day I shut it down, I was so relieved because it turns out that that wasn't right for me. In part because of the emotional labor it required, and in part because I felt like I wasn't receiving in return, um, either as an individual or as a business owner. So it was just this emotion suck all the time. And I want to be very clear that I'm not saying that anyone in that group was doing anything bad, because we can acknowledge that things aren't good for us, even if they are good for other people, and that's okay to to say I'm glad you enjoyed this, but it wasn't sustainable for me. So I shut that down, and ever since then, I've really continued to feel called to create a community space but didn't know how to do it in a way that was sustainable for me. And I didn't want to immediately, create something and then bounce right back out of it, or create something and not be present. Um, because I love hanging out with people. I love feeling connected and I love being able to help people. But if I'm just bouncing in and out of spaces because I'm not doing it in a way that is coherent for me, that's not fair to me or to anybody else. Because if I'm offering that space, I owe people who come into that space being present for them, if that is something that I'm going to hold. So, so in the meantime, in the last few years since I shut that group down, I got really involved in Discord, and I think I'm actually going to do a workshop that will be donation optional in the near future on Discord. If you ever used old school IRC, or if you've ever used Slack, it's very similar. And I'm not going to go into details about it because, like I said, I think I am going to do a free recorded workshop just to help people get used to using Discord in a low pressure way. But it is very different from Facebook. And for me, that's a benefit. That's a feature, not a bug. Because like Slack and like IRC, it's a real-time chat. And it's a continuous thing. Instead of being Facebook is a little more of a forum format where there's a post and then there's responses and there's another post and then there's responses. And it feels more like posting in a forum than it does like hanging out. And I really like hanging out. And so it's a great format for me. And I'm in several different servers already. I'm in one for my gaming guild. I'm in several related to the video game that I play, Final Fantasy 14. And I'm in a couple of professional type groups. I'm in a progressive religious server that I mostly talk about politics with people in, and and so this was a very natural fit for me. And I acknowledge that it's not going to be the best fit for everybody. Even though a lot of people are looking to move off Facebook, which is part of why I didn't restart something on Facebook, because so many people are leaving. And the thing is that no platform is going to be perfect for everyone. I've had some folks who want me to use Mighty Networks. I've had some folks who want me to look at Slack. I've had, some folks who want me to use like an old school forum site. And, you're never going to make everybody happy all the time. But also, to be really blunt, if we're going to hang out, it has to be in a way that works for me too. And so Discord was a platform I picked because it's one that feels very natural to me, and it's also one with a very low barrier to entry for someone who's setting up a server, a chat space, a community space. Mighty Networks has a huge effort and investment curve on the front end for it to be usable for people to come in and hang out. So that was why I picked it, and I'm really excited about that because it is a space that feels very intimate. It feels like a space where you can come in and share the thoughts that are passing through your head and share photos of your pets and share, here's what I was thinking about today without it being a big formal thing. And so that's why I ended up picking Discord. And it turns out that it was implemented way faster than I intended. Because I had intended for the blanket fort to have like a launch where I was teasing it for a few weeks in advance and talking about it and telling you about the process. And what happened was I knew that I wanted it to be part of my Patreon. Oh, let me come back to that. In a second. So let's talk about Patreon. So when I was thinking about what I needed to be able to hold a community space, I knew that I needed to be compensated. And this is hard to talk about because when business owners talk about being compensated for their work, especially business owners who are also activists, it's easy to think of us as greedy or grasping. But again, I'm not a therapist. And if I'm going to hold space for people, I need for that to be a space that nourishes me as well. And the form of nourishment that I need right now is financial, because I don't make a lot of money from my business, and I need an oxygen mask that I can put on so that I can help other people put theirs on too. And so I knew that I needed to be compensated for the constant labor I was going to be putting in, because there will be moderation. I will have to navigate conflict between marginalized people. I am going to have to be constantly present. And that's not a problem, but that is something that requires resources from me on a consistent basis. And so it's essentially a product that I'm offering, this community space, from a business and logistical standpoint. So I said, I can't do this for free. I cannot. Because I need my labor to be valued. I need my labor to be compensated. And so joining this with my Patreon made the most sense, because it's a reward for people who already financially support me. And it's also really accessible financially. My Patreon starts at $1 per month. Which should not be a hardship for anyone. And if it is, you are welcome to message me privately and I will get you a guest invitation. I don't want anyone to be excluded from this financially. But it does start at $1 a month, which for most people should not be a hardship. Um, and even if you were contributing $1 a month, it's important enough for you to contribute. And that is both really meaningful and really helpful because I got a mortgage. I need to eat. And if I'm hanging out with y'all, that is time that I'm spending that I am not doing other things. So it's only fair. But to come back to Patreon and Discord, what I didn't know is that when I hooked my Patreon to the new Discord server, which at that point was only like half done. I was still doing a lot of setup in the background and creating the boundaries for that space and putting the rules in and putting all the channel descriptions in. I was in the middle of that and I went ahead and hooked Patreon and Discord together. Well, what I didn't know was that when I did that, when I made that connection between the two platforms, anyone who was already a patron and already had their personal Discord account linked to their Patreon was immediately put into the server. So all of a sudden I had like 20 really confused people who had no idea that I had been working on this, dumped into the new server going, what's going on? So this thing that I had intended to like tease and do a big launch run up, all of a sudden I was frantically working that night to finish it so that people would have a reasonably finished space to be in, and I just went ahead and launched it. So that's why there wasn't like a big teaser run up, because once it already existed and people were already in it, it's like, might as well just invite everybody at this point. So I'm really excited about this Discord. I think it has a ton of potential for us to connect with each other and support each other and make friendships and make connections and hang out in a space that it's open to all body sizes. Everyone is welcome. Every identity, every gender, every body size, everyone is welcome. But there are private spaces within the larger space, specifically for fat folks and for super fat folks. Because having that space where these particular marginalized groups can talk and support each other without having to hold the feelings of people who are less marginalized is really important. So I think it's going to be such a wonderful community space. We are doing a 3-month trial because again, I'm trying to be very protective of my own needs and my own boundaries here. So this is the beginning of our 3-month trial, and I think it's going to last far beyond 3 months. I think it's going to be an amazing long-term thing. But that's what's going on. That's why it popped up out of nowhere, and I really hope you come join us. You can get there again starting at $1 a month at patreon.com/bodyliberation, and I hope to see you there. Come hang out with us.